Vindolanda Archaeological Leather Project. My name is Cheyenne. I am a PhD student studying Roman archaeology. Now in today's video, we're going to be talking about the most asked questions at the fence. And if you don't already know, I was assistant supervising this past May and June at the site of Vindolanda. At Vindolanda, they allow the public to come up and see what we are doing, what we're excavating, and also for them to ask questions if they have any. So sometimes people do, sometimes they don't. So in this video, I am going to be talking about the top 11, I know it should be like 10, but the top 11 questions that were most frequently asked at site. The first question is, how do the artifacts that we find get buried and left behind? During the, 4 or 5 centuries of Roman occupation in Britain, there were many auxiliary units and garrisons coming in and out of the fort. Once they're done being stationed there, they would literally just push their walls over, destroy what they've built, so that way when the next garrison or auxiliary unit comes in, they are able to then build to their size. All the artifacts that we do find on the ground underneath these buildings where the walls have been pushed down and the roofs have caved in, a lot of those artifacts are usually just rubbish that was left behind or garbage. So if there was anything precious like their weapons, their armors, things of value and for their job, they would have definitely taken that with them. But for the most part, the stuff that is left behind is just rubbish or garbage. The next question is, how is leather preserved for so long? Now, if you haven't watched my YouTube short that actually kind of talks about that, I'll just kind of reiterate it here. The soil composition in northern England is actually really great for the preservation of organic materials. It's called anaerobic, which just means without oxygen. Within the oxygen, there's the bacteria that would eat away organic material that we necessarily don't find very often in the archaeological record. Like in Italy, for instance, like we don't find any leather. If it does happen, it's a very rare, very uncommon thing to happen. In northern England, the soil is anaerobic, it's super waterlogged, it rains all the time. The soil, if you go down deep enough, will be able to actually preserve those organic materials like leather, wood. It also keeps metal objects really shiny because again, that oxygen is not in there to oxidize the metal away. So the next question is, do you get to keep anything that you find? The short answer is no. In the 1970s, UNESCO passed a bill constitution, but essentially saying that anything that's found in the country of cultural property must stay in that country. I'll have the link here for that if you guys are interested in it. But essentially, no, we cannot bring anything home. We are not antiquarians. They stay in their country of origin because that's where they were found. Another common question we got was, what do you think you're going to find? When the last section of the fort, we really could be a toss-up. Each fort is very different in the way that they're structured. Like they'll have their standard buildings like the Praetorium or the Principia, or the barracks for infantry or for foot soldiers or whatever. So like those areas are pretty standard, but within the organization of the fort itself, inside the fort walls, really does vary from site to site. In our case, it was really a difficult question to answer because we really didn't know for sure. We had kind of an idea and we're getting some of the similar walls and structures are coming out. However, after that, we really have no clue and no idea. So it's kind of a toss-up of like, well, whatever we find, and that's really great. Question number 7 is, what is backfilling and why do we do it? While I was there, we had finished one of the sections that they were working on in the past year, and then they were backfilling it. Backfilling just means that we take dirt that we've taken out of the ground and we just put it back over the earlier fort. Now, why do we do it? Is one, it helps preserve the actual fort structure that is still underneath. It is wearing away, unfortunately, due to climate change and, oxygen getting into the soil. So the wood is being eaten away at a very fast rate than it was, say, in like the 70s. So we want to make sure that we preserve it for future individuals who come to study the site and also just preserve it as best we can. Backfilling also allows us to make another area for people to walk through and talk about and discuss and see what was going on at that 4th century period. Next question is, what do we do with the artifacts once we find them and take them out of the ground? Well, we immediately document them, put them into, give them a small finds number, and then once that is done, they will be taken down to the museum where the curator and her employees and volunteers will document it, type it up, put it into a database, and make sure that it gets curated appropriately to the material in which it is. So that way it doesn't waste away and we can keep it as long as possible for future researchers and for publications and for us to just really understand the site and the artifact as well. Okay, so this question is actually a two-parter question because they kind of go together. How far do you have to dig, and do you use a machine? Yes and no. So normally we do not actually use a machine to excavate at all. However, there are instances that we actually do use machines, which is to backfill and to sometimes to just kind of scrape the topsoil. The northeast quadrant where I was excavating is the last section of the 3rd and 4th century fort that needs to finish. We actually used no machines at all. We did everything by hand, including deturfing, which was a job in itself, and some people loved it, some people hated it. To how far we gotta go down can really vary, obviously, depending on the landscape. For instance, we needed to go down about another 6 to 8 meters. And we do that all by hand. And by hand, I mean like trowels and mattocks and spades. So not like our literal hands. So question number 4 is, what is the most valuable thing you found? This question is usually asked by kids, so we try to make it kid-friendly. And I also try to twist it around because the main thing that we need to keep in mind is that we're not antiquarians. So what I mean by antiquarians is individuals who are looking to pull things out of the ground and keep them for themselves. We are literally there to understand the site, the demographics, the craftspeople, the ins and outs of the Roman Empire as a whole. There are so many things that we can get from the site through everything we find. So when somebody asks me, what's the most valuable thing you find? I'm like, well, it's the value of knowledge because that's what we're doing. That's why we're there. We're there to learn. We're there to understand the culture. Another question that I got very often was, are all of these people students? And the answer is no. Not everybody who excavates at Vindolanda is a student. So one thing I love about Vindolanda and why I love being a part of it is that they allow volunteers to come onto site, and we teach them everything that you need to know about archaeology. You don't have to have any previous archaeological experience. In order for you to volunteer, you have to apply on our website, and then once you get that approval or you've been kind of picked, it's a kind of a lottery system, then you pay a fee, and then you get to excavate for 2 weeks. And then we give you everything, we teach you everything, and then in return you get to learn all of this knowledge about archaeology, why it's important that we do it the way that we're doing it, and also that you get to be a part of history. And archaeology is for everyone, and I really truly love that, and I love standing by that. If you are interested, I will have a link below. Question number 2. This really applies to North Americans for some reason. I don't really know why this is the case, but anyway. I got asked quite often, do we sieve everything? Well, it's a difficult question to answer. Yes. However, each site is going to quote unquote sieve differently. So for us, we don't use the stereotypical sieves that you see like a swing and it has mesh at the bottom, or like kind of like a colander thing. So you throw your bucket on there and you shake it to get all the dirt out. For us, we screen everything, and screening just means that we do everything by hand. So as we're digging, we're looking for artifacts by hand, and then it just kind of adjusts differently depending on where we are in the soil, whether if we're in the dry or the wet part of the soil. So yes, everything gets sieved or screened to make sure that we get everything that we possibly can to understand the site to its full potential. Final question number 1 that I got asked all the time is, why don't you guys use metal detectors? This also varies from site to site. At the site of Vindolanda, we do not use metal detectors. However, there are sites that do use metal detectors to go through their spoil heaps to make sure that they've gotten everything, or, in different various situations, like they have legitimate reasons to do so. We choose not to, and there's also laws in place, especially on site, that we don't have any detectors or allow metal detectors present on site and on site ground. The reason why we don't use metal detectors is, again, we're not antiquarians. So the reason that we actually then excavate is, again, to establish knowledge, to understand what is going on at the time, demographic, economy, like anything you could think of about the Roman world, we want to know more about. For us using metal detectors, it just assumes that, 1, we are only looking for metals, and which we don't. We do find metals, and metals are important. However, it's not what we're solely looking for. And 2, it also assumes that, again, we're only looking for things of value, like like monetary value, which usually is then translates into like coins or helmets or whatever. But people also forget, like, we find hundreds and hundreds of nails. So if you're using the metal detector, like, you would literally be taking all of that, like including nails. And 3, you use metal detectors and you say you pull it out of the ground, that item and everything around it loses its context and provenance, which means when we study something, say we're looking at a room and we have all the artifacts that we found in the room, then we'll be able to actually study it and be like, what was the function in here? You know, what's going on? But if you say you take that coin out, say we found a coin and you pry that out of the ground with all that other stuff there, then we might not be able to date any of the artifacts there. And then 2, we can't even use the coin in research now because we have no idea where it came from. It just loses that, you know, it loses its fine location, it loses the area it surrounds. It really damages what we do. So please don't metal detect. Now that is it. That is most of the questions that I can think of that I got at site. But if you have any more questions, please feel free to comment below and I'll be able to hopefully answer them to the best of my abilities. But thank you again for watching, so like and subscribe. Okay, thanks.